G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 174 today. And we've gone north instead of south. So instead of talking to James Ridley and the crew back in Australia, we're now talking to Patrick Canion, who's our head of advice for Switzerland. G'day, Patrick.
Hey Brett, good to see you, mate. And the young handsome man's been replaced with the
Yeah, mate, he's running around Singapore right
the
now,
other
having a,
guy.
having a masterclass with Ben and Jeremy. Yeah, big numbers there in Singapore, which is great. A lot of support there from the Australian expat community. And as James and I said in the last episode, we plan to keep rolling this out throughout the world, and certainly Switzerland and other countries is on the cards. So, mate, let's keep the compliance officers happy in the world. Let's get the little disclaimer out of the way. So, all the information we're going to share with the good folks on the call today should be treated as informational and educational purposes only. Please do not construe this as personal advice. If you do need to seek personal advice, please speak to a specialist like Atlas. So, mate, you're in Genève, as the pronunciation
Mhm.
is correct.
Oh,
Obviously,
Genève.
yeah, that's right.
Oh, j'habite au Genève. Yes.
Navita, yes, that's the one. The other one, I'm trying to learn. I'm getting there slowly. But obviously, one of the things that a lot of Aussies face when they move to Switzerland is the
Mm.
concept of the Swiss pension scheme, the pillar system, very different to the Australian super scheme. So, mate, can you just give us a bit of a cook's tour on what the Swiss pension scheme is, how it differs to super, because most folks will understand superannuation, and how to make the best of their time in the Alps?
Absolutely. And it is a tough one to get your head around for Australians. And frankly, it goes the other way too for our Swiss friends that have moved to Australia because whereas in Australia, the focus is with superannuation is always around how much can I accumulate? How much can I build up? And the government wants to encourage you with maxing out your contributions, but then don't get too much accumulated because we don't want you to have too much tax advantage. So from an Aussie mindset, it's always about how can I get more in and where is it invested? Now, the Swiss take a different kind of approach. They say, we want to look at what is going to be your income in retirement and focus on the end goal as an income rather than as building up a bunch of wealth. And in simple terms, they kind of devise this into three sections or the three pillars, as they say. The first is the Pillar 1, the guaranteed minimum state pension. The second one, Pillar 2, is generally linked to your employment. And so you have to contribute to both Pillar 1 and, if you're employed, Pillar 2, and your employer has to contribute. And then finally, Pillar 3, or more specifically, Pillar 3A, is the top up that you can make voluntarily if you wish to. And it's kind of like, the rough equivalent would be a salary sacrifice or a personal concessional contribution into Australia. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that pillars one and two are really focused around providing a guaranteed, non-means tested income in retirement. And the corollary, that's a big word for me to say.
You got to learn after a few beers, that's for sure.
Say that in French. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I can. Of that is that along the way, you really don't have any investment choice as to where the funds are invested. Rather, the state guarantees Pillar 1, and usually a board of trustees does the investment choice for Pillar 2, and along the way, they just provide a very conservative crediting rate because they know they have to have plenty of reserves to guarantee a future income. Wow, that's a lot of talking. Everyone's an expert now.
No, look, it's good. I mean, I think, and Switzerland's not the only one that has these different subsets inside their grand, sort of pension plans. But,
Hmm.
everyone's who has an interest in Switzerland has always heard of the pillar system, but not exactly understood how, that system works. Obviously, taking into account one, two, and three,
Hmm.
if you were to say live and work in Switzerland for say 10, 20 years, and then you want to retire back to Australia,
Hmm.
from a portability point of view, from a liquidity point of view, um, how do the different tiers work in those pillar systems?
Yeah, yeah, really good question because Australia and Switzerland are kind of pretty special in that regard in terms of being able to, if you return to Australia, access your accrued benefits. So if you think about it, for Australians migrating to Switzerland, they can't touch their superannuation. It's got to stay in Australia until you meet a condition of release. Now, going the other way, returning to Australia, you can actually access all of your retirement benefits and have them paid out. So the Pillar 2 and then the Pillar 3 are the more straightforward ones. And you can basically say, look, I'm leaving the country. I'd like for these funds to be paid out to me in cash. And there's a process to follow, and there's a small amount of withholding tax on those. But you're then in a situation where, if you want to, you can have that money paid into your bank account and either leave it in cash in Switzerland or bring it to you in Australia and invest it in an appropriate fashion, but the point being is that you have control over that. You can either make a contribution to Australian super or you can invest it outside superannuation, whatever you choose to do. That's where you should get some good advice.
Yeah, because different rules and different
Yeah,
legislations there.
yeah, absolutely. Similarly, even with Pillar One, Australia is one of about, I think, only 8 countries in the world where you can actually claim back your contributions to your Pillar One. Again, subject to a withholding tax. Now, with the Pillar One, you actually have to wait till you're in Australia, and there's a separate bureaucratic process to apply for that, but it can be done. Now, the trade-off there is you actually want to say, okay, is this the right thing for me and my family to take control of the cash? Because you do have the option of leaving your funds in Switzerland in those pillars and waiting until you retire and receiving, a pension from them in Swiss francs. And given the strength of the franc,
It's not a
that
bad thing.
might not be a bad option. I mean, it will be accessible income to you in Australia, generally speaking. But on the other hand, it's a guaranteed income at a future date in Swiss francs, very strong currency. That could kind of prove to be worthwhile. I think
The
the
same.
important point, Brett, is that it's a decision, though. You need to, from an Australian tax perspective, you want to make that before you leave Switzerland,
Yep.
because if you leave it a year or whatever, it becomes very complex and also potentially, as we all know, very, very tax inefficient to try and bring your funds over after that period of time.
No, spot on, mate. And in terms of the ages, obviously Australia has preservation age of age 60 for now the vast majority of people. There's some older folks out there that have different versions, but let's call it age 60. That's what everyone understands. What do the age limits look like in Switzerland? So say, for example, either converting your Pillar A or Pillar 1 into a pension or taking the money out of your Pillar 3 and take it back to Australia. Do the same rules apply?
Yeah, Switzerland's always been a bit more focused on a age 65 retirement age for men, and until recently there was actually an age gap for between men and women. So they really focus on that. But if you're still working at 65, there's no obligation to take those benefits, particularly, sorry, Pillar 3A. You can keep pushing them forward until you actually retire. Similarly, if you're within 3 years of retirement, you can apply for some early access to your Pillar 3A benefits too.
Okay.
The other significant difference, I guess, in terms of retirement benefits in the retirement scheme between the two countries is that you can actually access your accrued benefits in a few certain circumstances before retirement. So you can use your accrued benefits, for example, as a deposit on a family home. Something that's comes up every few years in Australia as a topic of debate.
Yep.
But so far, or did it get allowed for a little bit there in COVID times?
Yeah, there's a bit
You
of
can, you
bit of
can
murkiness there. Yeah.
Yeah. But no. So the Swiss really see the family home as a store of value, and so they don't have any problems with you accessing it to fund your deposit, which is pretty helpful because Swiss housing is even more expensive than Australian housing.
Yeah, not cheap, not cheap. And let's just run through a bit of a scenario. So let's say I'm a 20-year-old Aussie, jump on a plane, bunk into Zurich. I'm there for 20 years. So from the age
Yeah,
of 20 to 40, I've obviously got my pillars set up, accruing nicely.
yeah,
I'll return to Australia. Now, obviously, I can't touch pillar one because I haven't met the retirement age. So that has to stay there. Pillars two and three, because I'm 25 years below the retirement age.
yeah. Well, so pillars two and three, you can absolutely. There's a whole process. You contact your retirement funds. Once in Switzerland, again, you actually go to your local government, your cantonal office, and you deregister. So you say, "I'm leaving the country. I'm getting out
Yep.
of here." You take that, they give you a certificate. You take that to your pension funds and tell them, "Okay, here's the process. I'm leaving the country. I'd like to have my benefits paid out." And so they will do that. They actually say, "Okay, give us your bank account details, and we'll need to deduct a withholding tax." Now that can vary, but usually it's less than 5%. So that needs to be deducted, and then off you go. Now with the Pillar One, again, Australia is one of these special circumstances. Once you're back in Australia, you can apply also for your Pillar One. However, the withholding tax on that's a bit higher. It's usually around a third that they take out if you want
Okay.
to. Now, what it does introduce, Brett, is there's some tax arbitrage opportunities here for you too, depending on your circumstances with your Pillar 3A. So if you know you're leaving in January, let's take a simple circumstance because Switzerland's financial year is the same as the calendar year. You can actually go along and say, okay, in November, December, let me make a contribution fully tax deductible of 7,200 odd francs into a Pillar 3A. I get a full tax deduction on that, which let's say that's 30% benefit. I can withdraw it with only a withholding tax of around 5% in January and take the funds back with me to Australia. So there's a few opportunities for some arbitrage there, but that's not the big thing. The big deal is probably going, what will I use these funds for in Australia?
Yep.
And am I going to get a more appropriate return, not only financially, but also for my lifestyle, that bringing them back to Australia? Or should I leave the funds in Switzerland, either in the retirement funds or in an investment account outside the retirement system?
Yeah, that's a good point because folks coming out of the US, they've got the same with their 401ks. They can withdraw them early, use the money to buy a property, buy shares, buy a car, buy a boat. They have that flexibility. But obviously they get the punitive tax because they're drawing it before 59 and a half. Also very similar to folks coming out of Hong Kong with provident funds. There is no preservation age. Once you finish working and leave Hong Kong, you can cash those provident funds in.
Mhm.
So it sounds very like a hybrid version of that. There's part of it where you can take, there's the other part that
Yeah.
has to stay there, and then you could draw the pension from that. In terms of obviously strategies to mitigate the Australian tax side on the Swiss pillar one anyway,
Mhm.
because that seems like the most obvious one as a income, foreign pension income coming into
Yeah.
Australia. What does that look like?
Well, of course, if you're back in Australia and an Australian tax resident and you start to receive your Swiss pension, it's fully assessable as income. Now, of course, presumably you're in Australia, you're retired. If you're receiving an allocated pension, you're probably on a very low income tax rate anyway,
Possibly zero, yeah.
if you've got good financial advice.
Yep, that's right.
So, if you think, from the maximum Swiss pension is about for Pillar One is about 2,500 francs per month.
Okay.
But let's say in your scenario there, maybe they've accumulated a benefit of 1,200 francs per month. Now that's in Aussie dollars, that's getting up to 2,200. There's another $24,000 on top of your pension, guaranteed for life, no means test.
So that's,
It's
and you might be just going over from the 19 grand, 19 into the 19% bracket. So you're not talking a lot of tax anyway, are you?
exactly right. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that could be actually a potentially very lucrative addition to either your allocated pension or your old age, your Australian old age pension for that matter.
Yeah, no, no, 100%, 100%. And in
Mhm.
terms of, when you look at and talk to, folks in Switzerland on the Australian side anyway, not Swiss who are moving to Australia, but Australians who are moving back. Um, is there still a lot of confusion regarding the Swiss pension scheme? Because everyone I talk to, they're all a bit sort of cross-eyed and sort of trying to understand the I guess the optionality of what they can do with it.
Yeah, totally. Because even with the Swiss almost treat the retirement, the pensions as a deferment of present income to the future.
Yep.
And so, for example, anyone who's in a Pillar Two scheme also has a notional buy-in to cover lost years,
Like
if you like,
gaps.
of
Yeah.
contributions. Yeah, exactly. So even if you move here when you're 40 or 50, for example, and you join the fund, it actually will calculate an amount, which can be, over 1 million francs even, that said, if you were in the fund when you started work, you would have contributed this. So if you have the money, you can put that in, and it's a tax deduction with
Okay.
uncapped. So and once you put it in there, it's not subject to wealth tax. There's a whole bunch of different trade-offs involved here to be considered. But it is something that's a challenge for us Aussies to get our head around because it's just such a different approach to accumulate as much as you can that
Does
we're
does
used
does
to.
the buy-in, is it limited to when you first moved to Switzerland or your age? So I'm just thinking, like, if you're 30 years old, you moved to, Geneva, um, can you buy in your 20s, even though you weren't living in Switzerland at the time, or would they allow you to do that?
Now you're going to ask, that's a tough question without notice,
Yeah,
Brett.
I know. So my head's going off on strategies here right now, how to reduce my tax in
It's,
Switzerland by claiming a deduction for something I'm not entitled to.
Totally. What I can tell you with certainty is you can go to your pension fund and ask them because they actually have to give you that
Buy-in.
specific number, and it's not just the number of years. It's related to a statutory revenue as income as well,
Yep.
which may or may not be your actual income. So there's a bit of actuarial
Crunching.
calculation involved in
Yep.
it. However, there's also, for example, at the moment, Swiss taxation works on a couple basis, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. That's just been changed. So you may have a situation where there's a disparity in income for a couple where you can actually take advantage of the fact that, okay, we have one higher, if you have a high earning person and a low earning person, at the moment they're taxed jointly. So any funds you put into one or the other will get a deduction for the couple. But in future, when they're taxed separately, okay, it's going to be based on their individual pension balances.
Yep.
So right now we've got 2 or 3 years where you can actually try and even up the pension balances, get a tax deduction, but effectively reduce your future tax burden by trying to spread the load evenly between a couple.
Okay. No,
Okay.
it's good. I like those sort of opportunities because I think it's that sort of scenario we all look at and go, you know what, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Well, absolutely. And I think the important thing is that everyone's circumstances, of course, are quite unique to their own lives, but their mathematical and financial circumstances are individual as well. And every sort of factor can play a difference, whether you're going to retire in Switzerland, retire overseas, go back to Australia, if you're married or single, and what your assessable level of income is. The what we basically have to do is we sit down and we look at all of those circumstances. We have the calculators. We take the input from the potentially three different pillars and come up with some scenario planning on all of that to help work out the best strategy.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. I
Well,
think that's the thing, isn't it? It's everyone's situation's different. We all have ties to Australia and Switzerland, obviously, because you're in that scenario. But
mhm.
what's best for you is not necessarily the best for the guy you met at the barbecue or your next door neighbour.
Well, exactly. And it also varies too, whether you're an employee or self-employed.
Yeah,
And I mean,
100%.
I know even just for my own circumstances, I came here expecting to be a self-funded retiree in future, and yet I am actually required to make contributions to Pillar One. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
And my initial thought was, well, actually, I won't want a pension. Thank you, Switzerland, but
yeah.
I'm expecting to have. But when I actually looked at it, I thought, well, this is not actually too bad an investment. If
Yeah.
I might have to live to 90, but
Look, I think it's forced savings is not necessarily a bad thing as long as the money is there at the end of the day for you to draw upon and retire upon anyway. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean it's sort of people love cash in the bank, but also too historically speaking, and as a majority of people out there are not very good at managing their money. So they'll take a nice holiday or buy a nice car, but very reluctant often to put extra money away for retirement.
yeah. And that's where it's really a fantastic system because it does create that forced savings, but it provides a guarantee at the other end of the chain that no
Yeah.
matter what, no, whether we hope basically Switzerland says we hope you do well, we hope you're fantastically wealthy. Regardless, you're going to have this guaranteed minimum income
Yep.
backed by the state as long as you live, and so you'll be provided for.
Fantastic. Mate, I think we've blown people's brains out in terms of
Yeah.
trying to conceptualize all these different pillars. I think people are sort of imagining the Parthenon in Athens, with all the different pillars, which one is which. So, well, put some labels on it. But, mate, really appreciate your time there. Appreciate, obviously the technical skills because it's not black and white. It really is quite a different scenario that people have to sort of face and understand as an Aussie living in Switzerland or as a Swiss living in Australia as well. So appreciate that, Matt, and we'll let you get
Pleasure.
on with your day and forward to seeing you on another episode.
Great. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, Patrick. See you, mate.
Yeah.